How do we learn to become perfectionists through our family? Is it something we inherit through our genes or we learn? And what about if my parents were not perfectionists? How did I learn to be a perfectionist myself? Welcome to Anti-Loneliness. I'm Vasi Sarandopoulou and I am a psychologist, and I'm all about sharing knowledge and tips about mental health, emotional well-being, relationships, and sharing all the secrets of the psychology world. And before we move to our video, don't forget to subscribe and also click on the bell so that you can get notified when we upload a new video. Today we're going to talk about what it means when a child is expected to be perfect, but also what it means if a parent expects themselves to be perfect. And last but not least, we are going to explore the different reasons how come we learn to be perfectionists through our childhood. It's not only through our parents, but it can be the surrounding environment. So let's start with the first one. What it means for a child to be expected to be perfect. So if you learned to be perfectionist through your childhood, that means that probably there was a lot of focus on your grades, a lot of focus on your performance, a lot of focus on the results that you brought home. You only had one thing to do, and that was go to school. So a lot of focus was there on your school performance. Your parents, or maybe one of them, was really concerned about your future, about your career, about your potential. And sometimes I've met people saying that this word, the potential, still rings in their head. You have to live up to your potential. So everybody was concerned about whether they are meeting their potential, about whether they are living up to their standards. And that's a lot of pressure, especially if you had a parent who was really into achievement and results and accomplishment. Probably you were overwhelmed with activities like going to drawing and dancing and piano and ballet and sports and different other activities, extracurricular activities. So probably you were overwhelmed with that, and you didn't even have time to play or enjoy or chill like a normal child. Another thing that happens when you learn how to be a perfectionist through your childhood is that you still remember the moments of disappointment when you made a mistake, or when you didn't meet your parents' standards, or when you failed in a test or an exam. You still remember because your parents would be the first one that would express the disappointment, and they would say, well, I expected more from you. Or, why not A? You got B, but why not A? And they would fill you up with this shame that you did something that was really bad. Also, it's possible that you heard more criticism than praise. It was easy for your parent to say when you're making a mistake than to say when you're making something nice. It was easier for them to say, well, I expected more, or this is not how it's done, or this is wrong, than to say, I'm proud of you. And usually people that I hear that they're perfectionists, they haven't heard this phrase many times from the parents, that I'm proud of you. And say it and mean it. They're coming from their heart. Also, when you grew up with a parent who was perfectionist, probably you grew up with a parent who was trying to control you or what you're doing or what you're saying, or your friends maybe. So there was a lot of micromanaging. They wanted to know where you are with your studies and who are you meeting and what are you doing, because they were afraid that at some point maybe you're going to slip under their radar and you're going to do something that take back all the progress that you have done so far. So they wanted to keep you on your toes. Another thing that probably you have experienced was parents that they were very emotional or frustrated when things were not going as planned, when you were changing your mind, or when you didn't have a concrete plan about what you're going to do, or they used to take decisions for you because they knew better and because they knew what was right or wrong, and they knew what was right for your career, for your financial independence and security. So they overstepped probably some boundaries, and they didn't let you decide about what feels right for you and what doesn't feel right for you. And last but not least, I hear it very often, people that they have grown with perfectionistic parents, that they were often put in comparison with other people, maybe with other classmates or with other authority figures or celebrities or whatever person. So they were always compared with somebody else. Well, the other person got an A, why not you? Well, the other person wants to be a doctor, why not you? So there were always these very subtle sometimes or very direct sometimes comparison and goal that we need to achieve. Now, what happens when a parent expects themselves to be perfect? First of all, the same thing that we said before, the last thing that we said before, applies for them as well. They also compare themselves to others. They also compare themselves to other parents. They look at what the other parent is doing and they want to be the same. They feel shame if they think that they are less of a parent. They feel ashamed if they think that they have done a less good parenting job in comparison to other people. So they have their own standards. They don't have only standards for you as a child, but also for them as a parent. And for example, they compare the muffins that another mother baked, or the progress that another father is doing at their job, at their career, or how much the other parents are playing with their child and they want to play the same thing. So there's this kind of competition. Also, what happens when a parent is a perfectionist is that they want to be the perfect mom or dad, the perfect boss, the perfect employee, the perfect partner as well. At the same time, they want to be good at everything. They want to be perfect at all the roles that they have. So what happens is that when they want to achieve perfectionism in all these roles is that they function a lot on a very practical level. It's like they have a checklist of things that they have to do in order to get the credit that they did a really good job. So they do the house chores, they clean the house, they do the groceries, they do the cooking, they do the gardening, they play with the kids, they watch TV, they do all the things that you're supposed to do when you are a parent. What's missing then? The passion, the joy, the content when they are doing all this. So they are playing with the child, but at the same time, their mind is on what I need to do next. Their mind is like, is it a good enough job? They're still in their own mindset of comparing or trying to meet some invisible standard. And I have heard many times parents saying that I do play with my kids, but I don't enjoy that. I don't feel anything. I'm just looking forward for this to finish. And this is really sad. And the reason why it's happening is because our mind is somewhere else. We are expecting something else to happen instead of being in the present moment. And what happens when, of course, as you understand, when you are a perfectionistic parent is that the priorities really get confused. We don't know what's important and what's not important. So we think that it's important that the house looks uber perfect and uber clean, but at the same time, we forgot how to have fun in our family, how to connect with each other, how to reach out and support somebody who was in need. So this becomes somewhere not as important as having a house seemingly perfect. Again, perfectionism here is a lot about control. And when we're trying to gain control over our environment and over what's happening around us, is that we focus a lot on the rational part of life and not on the emotional part of life, which means that the emotional connections and the emotional support in the family is not happening. And this is what we miss as children or as parents in a family when there's too much perfectionism. We miss the fun, we miss the connection with the people. So usually you will hear a perfectionistic mom or dad saying, well, I don't have time for that. Because they have all these checklists in their head and they don't have time for crying, supporting, cuddling, kissing, hugging, all these things. They don't have time for that. Or for complicated emotional struggles. They don't have time for that because they have all these other chores and lists that they have to meet up and the standards that they have had. And also when their child is in distress or when they're having problems at school that they cannot handle and they would like some advice or at least some validation and some emotional support, a perfectionistic parent would tend actually to jump in and fix the problem, to find a practical solution in order to move on so that we don't hang around there for a long time, than to emotionally soothe the child or to give them some guidance so that they can do it themselves. That kind of knowledge is not abundant in a family with a lot of perfectionism. Now, let's go to our last part, which is how perfectionism is linked with our childhood. And a big chunk of how it is linked is related with our parents. We had highly critical parents, as we said, that they were really focused on our achievements, our results, and our progress. And they were ready to give their criticism and not so ready to give their praise when we were doing something good. There were parents with high expectations, as we said before, that they wanted us to fulfill our potential. There were also parents that they taught us about conditional acceptance. They were happy and they were loving and caring when we were nice, when we were smart, when we were successful at school. But when all of these were not happening and we had an emotional outburst, or when we were misbehaving, or when we got a bad grade at school, then all their love and their attention and validation vanished. So we learned that in order for my parents to be nice to me, to love me, I have to be successful. I have to be good at school. I have to have a tidy room. I have to give something in order to get something. This is where we learn about conditional acceptance. And conditional acceptance, of course, in our adulthood is translated into perfectionism once again. Probably parents that they were also overachievers. That's something extra. Maybe they were not so focused on us, on our achievements, on our performance, but they were focused on theirs. So they were probably parents with an important career or with a high position or a lot of people depending on them. And that was something that we could see in the house. There was a lot of stress in the house. There was a lot of responsibility talking in the house. And we felt that, wow, our parents are important. And subconsciously, a child feels that if my parents are that important, I cannot be less than that. So immediately this subconscious invisible expectation is put on a child. I have to live up to that. And that is the parent. Also on the other side, there were parents that they had their own unfulfilled dreams. Parents that they wanted to follow their heart, become artists, dancers, move to another country, follow their passion, become pilots. But that was probably too risky during the years. So they decided that they need to settle for something less, for something more safe. So these unfulfilled dreams, probably they're projecting into their children and they are pushing them in order to achieve, in order to try, in order to risk. That's also something that can happen in an overcompensating way, pushing too much. And that can lead a child to believe that I always need to push myself even further, way beyond my comfort zone, because this is how things are done. This is how am I going to be happy. Not like my parents, that they were not happy because they didn't go beyond their comfort zone. So besides not having enough encouragement and acceptance and praise in the family and all these things that we discussed, let's take perfectionism out of the context of parents, what we saw and what we experienced together with them. But let's take it in the general context of what was happening during our childhood years. So it is possible that when a child has been through a traumatic and emotionally heavy experience in their life, or a very abrupt change, that they turn into perfectionism as the only way to bring some safety, security, and control. This is then their own coping mechanism. So if, for example, there has been divorce in the family, or a death in the family, loss in the family, then that was probably something that a child must have felt as emotionally very unpredictable and very heavy and to control and to process. So in their own way, they turned to perfection, which is focusing on their studies, focusing on their homework. Does it make sense? It's not about the parents now. It's about the environment that they were growing into during some period, important period during their childhood. And last but not least, when the family itself has been too chaotic, when everybody's doing what they want and there's no schedule, no routine, very emotional expressive, then maybe it's possible for a child to go to the other extreme and become very reserved, very controlling, more focused on the practical side of life rather than on the emotional side of life, because they have too many emotions in the house flying around and nobody can control their emotions. So you see that the perfectionistic mindset, which is the more practical and rationalizing mindset, can be a safety belt for a child that doesn't know how to deal with what's happening around them. So, I hope that was helpful to understand a little bit about how perfectionism grows in the family during our childhood years. And it doesn't mean that this is the only reason why we become perfectionists, but it's the biggest and most important reason why we turn to perfectionism. There are many other reasons, but this is where usually it all starts. Perfectionism, as we have said, is a coping mechanism so that we can deal with the stress that we are not enough. And when a child feels that they are not enough, either this information comes from their parents or it's coming from their environment, perfectionism is the way that they understand and they cope in an overcompensating way towards this stress in order to feel, even momentarily, even as an illusion, to feel a little bit safe in their world. I hope that was helpful. Don't forget, you can ask me any questions in the comments, write your own experience. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell so that you can get notified when we upload a new video. And also, don't forget to get your free guide, How Much of a Perfectionist Are You? Yes, there is a guide, free, for all of you. Lifetime access. Thank you very much for watching. Take good care of yourself.